Hello. So, thank you guys for tuning back into my YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe while you watch this full body stretch. I'm starting in a comfortable seated position, and I'm just going to start off by doing some belly breathing. The belly breathing is going to help engage my diaphragm, my pelvic floor. It's going to help turn on my parasympathetic nervous system, helping me to relax and really focus in on my body and how I'm feeling. And as I continue to breathe, I bring the chin up as I inhale, bringing the chin down to the chest as I exhale. And I'm just going to repeat this a couple of times. And I just want to give a quick disclaimer. If any of these stretches hurt, or if you're feeling pain when you're trying out any of these stretches, just stop. Stop, maybe take a break. Check your alignment and your posture, because these aren't for everybody, especially if you have maybe some injuries or if you have some dislocated discs. So now after the neck stretches, I'm going to do circles with the neck. I start off by bringing the right ear over the right shoulder, and with the breath, I just take it all the way around, inhaling on the back side, exhaling down and around. And you want to make sure you do both sides. So if you start off with the right ear over the right shoulder, you want to make sure you bring the left ear over the left shoulder. So I'm bringing my shoulders up into the ears, back, down, and around, making a full circle to open up my chest. I'm going to extend the circle out into my arms and my hands, bringing them up, back, down, and around. And because it's more common for people to have their shoulders rotated inward, I try to stretch and open up outward so that I can correct and balance my posture and the way I need it. So I'm just taking my right hand, bending my left elbow back, stretching my triceps into my lats. If you're really flexible, you can take your hand and bring it around to interlock your fingers if you want a deeper stretch. But this is pretty good for beginner level. And if you can't reach your hands, you can place a towel or a t-shirt in between your hands and pull onto the t-shirt. So the t-shirt or the towel will pretty much close that gap in between your fingers. So while I'm still in my seated position, I'm going to go ahead and flex my feet, have my big toes as close to my shins as they can go with all my toes stretched out. This is going to open up my plantar fascia and give a good stretch to my feet, my toes. And while I'm here, I'm going to interlock my fingers behind my back, lengthening my arms, rolling my shoulders back, trying to keep my spine nice and tall, chest open and lifted, tailbone grounding down. And after that, you can just pad out your feet. That helps to bring the circulation back into the feet. And I'm going to go into cat and cow pose from here. So, cat and cow is a good stretch to help open up your spine, get some movement going in the spine. As I inhale, I'm bringing the chin up and arching the lower back. And as I exhale, I'm curving to look at my belly. Now, this is great if you're not pregnant. If you're pregnant, you may want to try a modified version, which is bending the elbows for cow, and you can still arch the back to look at the spine, to look at the belly for cat. The difference is you're not arching the back and looking up for cow, because you're doing that a lot of the time during your pregnancy already, especially in your second and third trimester. So you just want to avoid excessive arching of the lower back if you can. So in another seated position, I just bring both my hands up above the head in alignment with my ears, taking my left hand down to the side on the mat and bringing the right arm over and just taking it around to the other side for balance. This is a good stretch for your ribs, your QL, your lats, your obliques. And I try to keep the elbow, the hand, the shoulders, and the hips all in alignment. And after I stretch both sides, I just bring my hands in front of me, stretching my lower back into the glutes, keeping my legs crossed. You can even extend the legs if it's more comfortable that way for you. So now with my feet planted, I'm just doing knee taps, working on my hip mobility. Just tapping my knee down to the mat and back up into a bent position. And I like to do these a couple of times just to get the synovial fluid warming up into my hips. And from here, I'm just going to do a pretty simple toe stretch where I'm reaching to my toes, lengthening my hamstrings, my calves, keeping the chest open. This stretch is really good for the hamstrings and the low back if you can stay in good alignment. And if you want more of a challenge, you can start to bend the elbows, bringing the elbows closer to the mat, maybe even interlocking your fingers around your feet. More importantly, you want to keep the chest open. With this stretch, I'm going more so into the glutes. If you're pregnant, you may want to stay away from this stretch if you feel a twist in the lower back. And so with the opposite hand, I just take it behind my pelvis and try to place it right in the middle to get a good stretch in the chest, in the obliques. And these stretches that I'm doing are more so considered static stretches because I'm getting into the posture and just holding it for about 30 seconds. Now, I'm doing the similar stretch that I did earlier, folding at the waist, but this time, when I bring the chin into the chest, it helps to stretch out the muscles along the spine. And so if you're someone who stands or sits a lot at work, this is a really good stretch to loosen up the spine, the muscles all along the spine, by curving the neck into the chin. The chin into the chest. And then you're going to send your hands out towards your feet, but you don't necessarily have to grab onto your feet. They can just be aiming for your ankles. Gonna do it one more time, bringing the chin to the chest, curving the spine, reaching towards the feet. This is really good to do in the morning if you have any back pains, any back stiffness. So I'm folding at the waist one more time, keeping the chest open. And now that I am doing this for the second or third time, I'm going a little bit deeper. You guys have to excuse the yawns in the video. This was very early morning, and I was just waking up, so I was a little tired. I spent this weekend in a cabin in Tennessee, and so just being out in nature, I really was just grateful I was able to move my body, and I had some space to do it in the cabin. So now I'm going into a glute stretch. This one is usually called like a figure 4 stretch. And so you just take one bent knee, you place the other foot, the ankle right over the knee, well, a little bit past the knee. And you can just bring the hip in and out, away and closer to the foot. Depending on what angle you feel it the most, you just kind of want to find a good spot. And stay there, breathe for a little bit. You can do some ankle rotations. You can do a little bit of twisting if you feel like you need to get another spot in the stretch. And always remember to do both sides. If you're someone who does a lot of squats, if you're sitting a lot, standing a lot. Really, this is a good stretch for anybody to do. And these stretches can be done every day, especially if you're somebody who works out. It's really important to stretch and lengthen the muscles. So from here, I'm going into a butterfly stretch, and this stretch helps to open up your adductors, your inner thigh muscles, the groin, as some people call it. And so I just have my feet touching together, all the toes touching, and I try to lengthen the spine as best as I can while letting the knees fall apart closer to the ground. Now, if you're a beginner and this stretch is really uncomfortable for you, you can try this one lying down with your back to the mat, letting your knees fall to the side, or you can place some yoga blocks or pillows under the knees to give you some support. And so I do a little bit of rocking just to help get my hips open. And so from here, I'm going to go into a low lunge with one knee on the ground, one knee bent. If you're pregnant, you may want to have some support under the knee, have some cushion under the knees, either with a pillow or you can even use a blanket. And as you inhale, you want to bring your body closer into the knee, leaning into the stretch. And then as you exhale, you can send your hips back. After a couple times, you can hold it in each position. Let gravity do the work on the hips while you focus on your breath. Yoga blocks are really helpful for this stretch as well. This is a great stretch for your hip flexors, your hamstrings, glutes, IT band even. It gets a little bit into the groin. And so while I'm in the low lunge, I like to do knee circles just to give a little bit more hip mobility. And I do about 4 or 5 circles to each side. So like I said, with the stretches, you just want to make sure you do both sides of the body. If you start with the left, make sure you finish with the right and vice versa. And of course, if you notice that you're a little bit more tight or have a little bit more stiffness on one side of the body, you can spend a little bit more time there. But you always want to aim for balance when it comes to the body. So whether it's muscular balance or within your posture, you want to make sure things are in place, nice and even, so that you don't have any tension or stress to one side of the body.
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
You want to try to keep the spine nice and tall in this stretch as well, keeping the chest open. Ideally, you may want to warm up the body before going into any deep stretches. So whether that may look like a walk, a jog, jumping jacks, whatever you like to do to warm up the muscles before you stretch would be really ideal so that you can get the most out of your stretch, because it's better for you to warm up, to lengthen warm muscles than to try to stretch cold muscles, because you may not get the most out of your stretch. And so for my low lunge, I'm going into a split. Now, definitely choose wisely. If you want to do a split, definitely for the men out there watching, you don't have to. For the pregnant women out there, you don't want to. You don't have to. You can go into a pigeon pose, which is another alternative. But I really hadn't done this. I haven't practiced my splits in a long time, so I really just felt like I needed to get into one.
Well, everybody's telling you, nobody said that.
Splits are something I used to do more regularly, but with work and volunteering, I haven't really had the time to get into my deep stretches. And so while I was on vacation, I was so happy that I had some extra time to myself. And so this is the pigeon pose I was referring to. When you're doing pigeon pose, when your ankle is closer to your hip, the less of the stretch you will feel. And when you bring your ankle out away from the hip, you're going to get a deeper stretch going into the IT band, into the glutes. And so really you just want to go to a position where you're comfortable. And once you find it, you can continue breathing, and you can even bend at the waist if you like.
That's it. Girl, those be the most important parts. It may be under your titty if you sweat a lot. But that's quick. 5 minutes. Maybe less. It just depends. It's more the prep time. Yeah.
This is also a really good stretch for the hip flexor for the opposite leg. And so to come out of a pigeon stretch, you can go into a plank position like how I did, pushing off the ground with your hands, lengthening the leg, and just kind of walking it out a little bit to get the blood flow back going into your legs. Or you can push up with your hands and go into a downward dog position. That's another alternative for getting out of this pose, because if you're in it for a long time, it can kind of get, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but it can be hard to get out of smoothly. So pushing off against the ground and walking the legs out, it's a good way to
What was it at yesterday?
just kind of bring your hips back into neutral position.
Honestly, I think I wasn't paying attention to the temperature.
And with this stretch, you can also place some cushions and pillows under your knees.
Yesterday was hot.
For support.
Well, I feel like the sun was hitting in the right direction. So I mean, as the day goes on, it's gonna get hotter. It's just cold right now.
So like I said, the closer your ankle is to your hip, the less of the stretch. If you want to deepen your stretch into the IT band, your glutes, all you have to do is slide the foot out and away from the hip to give yourself more of a challenge and more of a stretch. So now I'm just going to take my split into the other leg. Like I said, for most people, one side of the body or one leg or one shoulder may be a little bit tighter than the other. So wherever you feel like you have to hold a stretch a little bit longer, just feel free, get comfortable, focus on your breath. Maybe play some music, catch up on one of your favorite TV shows. As you can see, I'm doing a nice little belly pump here in this video. My shoulders aren't really moving much as I breathe, but if you notice, my belly is doing a lot of the movement as I breathe because I really want to engage my diaphragm, which is my primary breathing muscle, which is going to help turn on my parasympathetic nervous system, helping me to relax as I stretch my body out. So from my split stretches, I'm just going to go into a child's pose, bringing the big toes together, knees apart. And I'm bringing my forehead down to the mat, have my arms extended. And this is just going to bring everything back into balance, open up the hips, the lower back. This is good for the lower back and the adductors as well. And while you're in the child's pose, if you want to bring your palms together and fold at the elbows, this will lengthen your lats, your triceps, and really help to open up the chest. From a child's pose, you can go into a puppy pose, and all that means is you bring the hips above the knees and the forearms still stay on the mat. The forehead can stay on the mat.
Huh? Good morning. Morning. How are you? This morning.
Going back into my child's pose. And then going back into puppy pose. And so now this is going to be a frog pose stretch. And frog pose is also another good stretch for your adductors. If you are someone who does a lot of squatting, a lot of running, this would be a good stretch to help open up your hips. A lot of the time, the hips can be a place that tends to close easily, and when the muscles are not engaged. And so this really just helps to bring some attention to the inner thighs and the adductors, with your ankles in alignment with the knees, and the knees going straight out to the side of the body. You can get a really nice good stretch here.
Because he's like, don't you got a job? I'm like, because I don't ask him for money. He's like, is this you? You really? Okay, better. I low key love island parents because I don't think they ever look at their kids as like grown ups. So it's like when you ask for certain. Some of them do. Oh. No. Some of them do. You know, speaking for both sides. Okay, you're one of the cases that I don't. But your parents are young and they did school and stuff here. Well, your parents went to school and stuff here? My dad. Oh, okay. But see, Gabby, both your parents, they young and they are island. They were not born here. But my dad came here when he was 10. Oh, Gabby, he's American. Not with his dad. Okay, Gabby, my mom came here when she was 19.
And if you are starting in child's pose and you want to get into frog pose, all you have to do is slide your feet out with the toes pointing out so that your ankles are right under the knees. Because in child's pose, your knees are already open and separated.
No, that's not what I mean.
To take it into frog pose, you just slide your feet.
No, I'm saying like they actually struggled and you know, let me not say that, because my parents didn't. I mean, they just had less when you compare it to the American life. But to them, their living was fine. Like my mom wasn't poor in Haiti, but you know, like she had to.
And like I said, if any of these stretches feel uncomfortable, if you are starting to feel pain as you try some of these stretches out, please just stop. There are multiple ways to stretch the body. There are multiple ways to relieve tension and to provide relief. So if one way doesn't feel good and it's bothering you, causing more pain and discomfort, just slowly come out of the stretch. And there are other ways to find relief. And so these are just some stretches that I do, some of my go-to stretches that I use to